YouTube, DDG here. In today's rolling video, we're going to be covering missing the timing. Now this is a term that you might hear often, and a lot of players use it, sometimes without even knowing what it means. So today we're going to go in depth into what exactly missing the timing is and how it affects you. When multiple effects occur, a chain is formed. I'm going to be using these Legos throughout the video as an example of this. Now there's two primary ways cards can affect the chain. One, effects that activate and physically go on the chain, and two, continuous effects. Now think of continuous effects as the terrain around us. They're indirectly impacting the chain, and they're not on the chain. Now one very important rule of thumb in order to understand chain building is you cannot interrupt a resolving chain. Now what this means is once both players have built their chain and both agree they are now resolving their effects, you cannot interrupt it with new activating effects. This chain has to completely resolve before these new effects occur.
Here's an example. Continuous effects, like Shinzo or Koikime or Drago, are immediately applied on their successful summon. Now when it comes to continuous spells and traps, they have to initially activate. Now keep in mind, some continuous spells and traps may not have a continuous effect. There's a difference between the card being a continuous spell or trap and it having a continuous effect. The little infinity sign on the card only means that that card remains face up on the field after activation, so it's important to not confuse those two. Let's take a card like Call of the Haunted, for example. Its most updated text says, target one monster in your graveyard. Special summon that target in face-up attack position. Now this is the effect that occurs on activation. So once activated, Call of the Haunted is going to target a monster in order to special summon it. Now this part of the effect attempts to occur on activation of the card. Now the next two sentences, when this card leaves the field, destroy that target, and when that target is destroyed, destroy this card, are continuous effects. So if I summon a Gravekeeper Recruiter under Necro Valley, its attack change occurs as soon as the monster is successfully summoned. That means it can be Bottomless Trap Hold. If you summon a tour guide from the Underworld under Skill Drain isn't going to start a chain in response to tour guide, trying to negate it, like an activated effect would. On resolution, if Skill Drain is still face up on the field to be applied to tour guide, it will negate tour guide's effect. For Call of the Haunted, if it's destroyed, no matter where on the chain link, that monster attached to it is immediately destroyed as well. These are how continuous effects work. And if you're ever having a hard time trying to figure out what effects are and are not continuous, you can always look this information up. It's readily available to you just by Googling the card name. Now that this is established, we can get into chain building. I summon Tour Guide from the Underworld. I activate a effect that triggers upon summon, and ask my opponent if he has a response. Passing priority, now called fast effect timing. This means my opponent now has a chance to respond with a spell speed 2 or higher effect, or pass and allow me to do the same. Tour Guide is chain link 1 as represented here. He responds by activating Torrential Tribute. Now this Lego will represent that. This is chain link 2. Now remember, Tour Guide has not special summoned a monster yet, and the Torrential has not destroyed anything yet either. He passes priority. I respond by chaining a set MST, targeting another face-down card he set. This Typhoon is chain link 3, as represented by the Lego here. I pass priority. My opponent responds by chaining the card targeted by MST, it being a Call of the Haunted. He selects his target. His target is a Light Pulsar Dragon in the grave. This is now chain link 4, represented here. Remember, the monster isn't summoned yet, and the chain isn't over until both players agree it is. Also remember that nothing has been destroyed or summoned yet. He has no further responses, nor do I, and now the chain can begin to resolve. So now we know how to build a chain. It's like climbing a ladder. You have your chain link 1, someone goes on to chain link 2, which is the next step, and then chain link 3 is the next step, and then it keeps building upwards until both players agree that they're done building the chain. At this point, we resolve the chain. Now how do you climb down a ladder? You don't climb down it by climbing up it a second time. You have to start climbing down each step. So now this is where the concept in a chain building upwards and resolving downwards comes in. So the first effect we resolve is Call of the Haunted. Now Call of the Haunted special summons Light Pulsar Dragon. Its continuous effect is now applied to Light Pulsar Dragon, and we move down a step. Now Mystical Space Typhoon resolves and destroys Call of the Haunted. Call of the Haunted's continuous effect is applied and destroys Light Pulsar Dragon. Now we're not done resolving the chain, so Light Pulsar does not activate. Now, we go on to Torrential Tribute.
Torrential Tribute resolves and destroys Tour Guide from the underworld. And then finally, Tour Guide resolves and special summons a monster. So what occurs in the instance of Pulsar? It met its condition to be destroyed, so now it can activate, right? No, it can't. And this is why. Optional when you can effects miss timing. So if they're not the last thing to occur in the game state, they cannot be activated anymore. In this instance, the last thing to occur in the game state on resolution of the chain was Tour Guide summoning a monster. Pulsar would have had to been destroyed on Chain Link 1 in order to activate its effect. So a Chain Link 1 Torrential or a Dark Hole destroying Pulsar will allow its effect to trigger. By knowing this, you can create tons of countless scenarios where a card with an optional when you can effect missed timing. Alright, onward to the next example of a monster that misses timing. Elemental Hero the Shining. He has an optional when you can effect. So if you summon him to the field, whether it be through Fusion Gate or Miracle Fusion, a monster is now successfully summoned to the field, and I can respond to the summon of the monster. So, I activate Forbidden Lance. My opponent has no response, and so I chain Torrential Tribute to the Forbidden Lance. Now we resolve the chain. Remember, Forbidden Lance has not resolved yet. It only targeted the Shining. So Shining is not unaffected by this Torrential Tribute at this point. The first thing to resolve is a Torrential, destroying the Shining. Next thing to resolve is Lance. Now since the destruction happened on Chain Link 2, the last thing in the game state to happen was not Torrential destroying Shining, but instead Lance resolving. Because of this, Elemental Hero Shining misses timing. Another instance of cards that cause other cards to miss timing is individual cards themselves that have additional effects after their effect that would cause the monster to not miss timing. So for example, Raikou the Lightsworn Hunter. It has a destruction effect, and it can destroy Light Pulsar Dragon or Shining. However, it also has an effect to mill the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard, and that effect occurs after the destruction effect. Since the last thing to happen in the game state was sending the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard, Light Pulsar Dragon and Shining would miss timing in this scenario. Now you guys might be familiar with the popular tech Soul Taker. It's like Raikou. Because it has an effect that occurs after its destruction effect, it can cause cards like Pulsar and Shining to miss timing. Another instance where a card can miss timing is when a spell or trap activation condition can no longer be met. Now you guys might have seen this in a duel video I had with Robbie Cole, and some people were kind of confused, so I'm going to use this as an example. My opponent summons a gadget monster, doesn't matter which gadget monster, but activates its effect to search. Now remember, it hasn't searched at this point. Now I have a chance to respond to the summon of this monster, and I respond with a Chain Link 2 Call of the Haunted. I target Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon in my graveyard for Call of the Haunted's effect. Now remember, this monster hasn't been special summoned yet, and the gadget hasn't searched yet. The chain is still being built. At this point, because Red Eyes is not on the field yet, and the chain is still being built, you can't activate cards like Bottomless Trap Hole trying to destroy this Red Eyes. It's not on the field yet. My opponent can't have any response at this point, so he has to allow the chain to resolve if he wants to destroy this Darkness Metal through those kind of effects. However, Call of the Haunted special summons Red Eyes, and we still have to finish resolving this chain because you cannot interrupt it. So now Gadget searches out a monster. Now that the Gadget has searched out a monster, the last thing to occur in the game state is Gadget searching out that monster. So you cannot activate cards like Bottomless Trap Hole or Torrential Tribute in order to destroy the Red Eyes. Now this is really cool because now you can make some very game-changing plays. Like if you see your opponent with a lot of back row and you know they have something to stop your monster, you can build the chain in this way in order to stop them from using effects that have activation conditions like activate only when a monster is summoned, or etc. Now one thing to note to avoid any confusion is missing the timing has to do with resolutions, not the chain being built. So if I summon a monster successfully through Monster Born, anything Chain Link 1, or normal summoning it, the last thing to happen in the game state is the summon of the monster, and any chain being built in response to the monster summon is still a chain occurring in response to the summon of the monster. So if I summon Darkness Metal Dragon, and you activate Torrential, and I chain Trap Stun, you can chain another Torrential or a Bottomless Trap Hole. This is all occurring in response to the monster. So let's not get these two mixed up. Another thing to not get confused with is simultaneous effects triggering. What this means is if you have 2 Pulsar Dragons on the field and a Sangan, and I activate Dark Hole, all of these monsters are being destroyed at the same time. It doesn't matter if Sangan has a mandatory effect, it's not blocking those Pulsars from also activating. These effects will simply form a chain after the Dark Hole resolves, Sangan being Chain Link 1 because it's mandatory, and the 2 Pulsars also forming a chain. This is very critical to know because, again, this is an instance where people constantly mix up with missing the timing. As an overview, optional when you can effects miss timing if the last thing to occur on resolution of a chain in the game state is not the condition that needs to be met for them to activate. Remember, this can completely change the way you play the game, so this is very critical to know. I'll see you guys next week with my next ruling video. Take care. What the fuck is this?